Hi guys, Thogrey here for a new video, and this video will be a PvP guide video for Arms Warriors patch 9.2.5 season 3 of Shadowlands, and we will discuss about a few topics. But before we start, if you want to check out my Fury PvP guide video, you can always check it at the end of the video. It is probably more meta than Arms, but if you like Arms like me and you want to play more Arms Warrior, and although it is not God tier, you can certainly make it work. So we will discuss about a few topics. There is gear and Lego. You have talents, PvP talents, Covenant and Conduit, and of course we will discuss about different comps that you can play, the rotation that you need to use to maybe burst or try to prepare for your burst, and you will see some gameplay with a bit of applications of that knowledge. But let's start right away, and you will see in the timestamps below which topic I'm discussing and until when. I will try to make this video short and concise. It has already been 1 minute, but let's go right away. So we are on my Arms Warrior. I've race changed it to human. Let's discuss about races real quick. In Alliance you have a few good races, to be honest. Like human is very good for the double trinket if you want, or you only play with one trinket versus specific comps. Then you can play double power trinket, so you will have an unused and a passive one, or you can play relentless, whatever. And in horde side you can play orc, which is probably the best, or you can play tauren. You have a lot of choices, but I would say the main meta races are human, orcs. You have also night elf, which is also good for avoiding CC. You can also play dwarf versus assassination rogues, but you cannot really race change on the go every time you have a matchup. So you need to decide probably for yourself which races you want to play first, or all the time, of course. So let's discuss about the gear and Lego, and we will discuss about the tier set. So I just sucked my helm, but let's discuss about the tier set. Warbreaker lasts 3 seconds longer, which is great for your burst rotations. Gives you more time whenever you're going to burst, which is crazy and actually nice. Increases your damage dealt also by 5% with Warbreaker, so instead of 30% increased damage, you will have 35% damage, and of course 13 seconds of uptime with Warbreaker, which is very nice. You have of course this second part of the tier set, which is Tactician, has a 50% increased chance to proc against enemies with Colossus Smash, so it's quite nice because you will have a lot of Tactician procs, so you can always have a 2-stack overpower of your Mortal Strike, for example, which is crazy, and to be honest it will make up for the damage loss that you have in consistent damage, for example. You will also have a 2% strength per overpower that you use with the Tactician proc, and of course it will go up to 8% for 15 seconds. The nice thing is, throughout the match you will have that proc and you will have that buff. Of course, whenever you're getting CC'd out of Oblivion, you will probably lose those stacks, but that's not a problem because you can stack it very nicely, and pretty much 80% of the match you will have 8% of strength, which is quite nice for a Arms Warrior. Let's discuss about stats first before we start about the Legos. I've decided to opt half haste, half mastery with a bit of crit. I like to have a bit of crit because of the Legos that I'm playing, because of the Covenant I'm playing, but also I like the feeling to crit a Mortal Strike or a execute. Of course, the ideal way to play Arms Warrior without RNG is probably to have a lot of haste and a bit of mastery, because you like to have increased damage taken to the enemy team. But to be honest, I've tried full mastery, I've tried full haste, I've tried full crit, but at the moment this build is what works for me. Versatility is a nice stat to have as an Arms Warrior, but you don't really need to stack versatility as before, because it is also very hard to stack versatility, and you don't have the 2 set trinket from season 2, for example. So now you don't really need to prioritize versatility. Of course, always go for speed gems and speed in general, because it also is meta with all the slows and roots in the game. So let's discuss about the legendary that I've chosen. It is Unhinged. I like to play with a Blade Storm that does actually good damage. And it also is crazy whenever you have like 2 stacks of overpower plus sharpened blade and then you blade storm, you're going to cleave that damage towards everyone if you have, like, for example, sweeping strikes. Often than not, if you can, I'm going to reveal the Covenant. Of course, I'm playing now Kyrian. You can also play Necrolord, but Kyrian is quite nice for various comps. Of course, outside of arms, red war, but I'm going to discuss it in the comps section. For a Bloodstorm, whenever you're going for the Spear of Bastion, you're going to do insane cleave damage. Sometimes it is unhealable for the enemy team, and you need to remember whenever you're Bladestorming, you can still use defensives. So you can still use Die by the Sword, Spell Reflection. So you have a lot of good things with Bladestorm. Also, you want to Bladestorm most of the time to get out of CC, but whenever you get uptime, it is also the moment where you're going to burst with Bladestorm, and whenever you're going for Avatar, for example. Of course, you have the Unity Legendary, which gives you increased Spear of Bastion duration, but also increased critical damage strike, critical strike damage whenever you are within the Spear of Bastion. Excuse me, I'm still a bit sick. So, let's discuss about the talents now. Why do... or the reason why I pick Kyrian with Unhinged. I like the ongoing damage that you can do with a Bladestorm. I always liked Unhinged. I always liked Spear of Bastion. Of course, Necrolord is also a very good Covenant, which is probably mandatory whenever you're playing a comp like Red War, if you want to one-shot people. But whenever you're playing anything outside of Red War, you can really play Kyrian and do a lot of damage, but also peel a lot for your teammates. So for talents, it's pretty basic. I'm going to go over the talents that I'm always going to pick, and then I'm going to give you suggestions based on comps, for example. Often than not, I play Sudden Death because execute damage is very high, and you want that, to be honest, because Skull Splitter is just not an option, and War Machine is a PvE talent, and which is probably never taken anyways, but Sudden Death is very nice to have. Double Time, this row is probably the best row because you have a lot of options. In twos, I probably play a lot of Double Time with Warbringer because I want to have uptime versus enemies. You have also the comfortable damage that it can provide with charge. Sometimes you are going to crit for 15k, for 20k whenever you're bursting, which is insane for a charge. You are pretty much a demon hunter whenever you're going to charge every time, like a fell rush from a demon hunter whenever they're going for immolating aura. But you can play impending victory, which is probably whenever I'm playing trees, I play most of the time impending victory because I like the instant healing that I get, because often than not we die in CC. Whenever my healer is in CC, I need to be able to survive, and impending victory gives me the possibility to survive every 25 seconds. I can heal myself pretty much 40% health, except whenever I'm gaining mortal wounds, so it means that I get a debuff on healing. Then I have probably around 25%, 20% healing from impending victory, which is also scaled with sweeping strikes. So whenever you're in AoE situation and you do impending victory, you're going to heal also double that amount, which is crazy if you would actually think about the amount of healing that you can have as an arms warrior. If you want to play with more CC, you play with Stormbolt. This is probably the talent that I'm using the second most in trees. In Double Time, I'm really never going to use in trees, because often than not I play with either a one-shot comp, or I play with a BM Hunter, for example, or a enhancement shaman, or something that has uptime like all the time, which gives you actually not really the need to go for double charge. As a Fury Warrior, you can always play double time to be very obnoxious. Row 30, you don't really have a choice. You play with Massacre, but often than not, whenever I'm playing with versus double plate, I often than not take Rend. Rend does surprisingly good damage, also increases your critical damage, and it scales with the Spear of Bastion, so pretty much you're going to crit crazy good whenever you're going to crit. That's why I like to have a bit of crit stats, because I like to crit more often, and it is actually very nice to actually play around crit because it feels good to crit. Road 35, I play with Bounding Strike because I don't like to get kited, but I also don't see the defensive stance as a USP anymore. I feel like if you're damage reduced for 10%, but you do 20% less damage, I think the trade-off is not good. Also the CD and also the amount that you're going to stop is very little, that I prefer Bounding Strike whenever I'm going to leap away because I want to run away from damage, or I want to run into the enemy team. Also the increased run speed is always nice to have as a arms warrior. Second Wind is a PvE talent. Wallbreaker or BG talent is also good. Wallbreaker, of course, is the only option. Very nice AoE damage increase for the team, which is very nice. Warbreaker, a very good talent to use for AoE situations, especially. Colossus Smash is the weaker version of Warbreaker in general. I like to have an AoE because I know that, okay, I'm going to hit multiple targets, I'm going to sweepy strikes, I'm going to actually blade storm. I feel like I have a lot of value with Warbreaker. Avatar is probably pretty much the go-to talent that you want in row 45. Deadly Calm is meh. I tried to play with it, but I don't like it. And In for the Kill, I guess every 45 seconds you get a 10% haste, maybe sometimes 20%. But I feel like it's not that useful in general. Row 50 Dreadnought, which is probably the best talent that you can use for that row because you want to actually improve your mortal strike damage. And it is actually crazy how high you can hit with a mortal strike, and whenever you're critting, the people are going to be insane because they cannot really heal themselves because of that. Anger management, I've tried to play it because I wanted to make Bladestorm as short as possible, but the thing is, I really like the damage from overpower. The Dreadnought damage is also quite nice, but also the 2 stacks for overpower is something that sometimes you will miss throughout the match. I've tried anger management, I've tried Ravager, I've just preferred Dreadnought. Just pick Dreadnought if you want to be successful as an arms warrior. So PvP talents, that is the most important thing in this guide. You have a lot of options. Now, if I'm playing Impending Victory or Stormbolt, I often don't take Warbringer because Warbringer is just not the best talent to use for that specific thing, for that specific PvP talent. I'm going to show you which talents I'm picking most of the time in trees. In twos, I might pick Warbringer for the damage, but in trees, you don't really need the damage, you need the utility for your team. So you have Master and Commander. I like to play that versus rogues, subtlety rogues. Why? And often than not, I will lose one of those good talents, but I like to be able to heal my my healer whenever they're getting shadow dueled. Whenever they are getting shadowy dueled, you do rallying cry, and they most likely will survive that shadowy duel. Of course, you can be CC'd, and then you cannot really help anyone. But this might save the day because you can have 40% increased health for a short duration, but it is very nice because your CD will be reduced to 2 minutes, and it is actually noticeable how hard you can actually carry your team with utility. I don't play Shadow of the Colossus, I feel like it's not that good. War Banner, I play it versus a lot of comps where I see that setup is the way that they are going to go for whenever they are going to win versus us. So I like to actually disrupt that CC chain with Warbanner. Often than not, I put Warbanner, it gets instantly deleted, but just that milliseconds that you can put Warbanner whenever they are going for a CC can help your team to actually thrive and survive some damage. Duel, I like to play Duel whenever I'm playing versus Cleaves. I don't play it that much, but I feel like sometimes when I'm playing with a elemental shaman, so Thundercleave, I have discussed it in my top 5 fun comps that I'm also going to list at the end of the videos. Thundercleave, the elemental shaman will be probably alone most of the time whenever they are going to kite. So you need to protect that ally as much as you can, and with duel you can actually help your ally because it just reduces by 50% the damage that they are going to deal to other targets. So it's actually very nice to play with duel. It is underrated. Sometimes people don't really get how they survive, but I'm going to say that most of the time it is because of a good duel that you can place versus the enemy team, and they need to switch or they will do little to no damage to that target. Death Sentence, I don't play it since it has a CD. It doesn't feel right. I feel like often than not, whenever you have a execute proc, you are already in range. So I don't like to play Death Sentence. With all the utility that you have, I prefer to have more utility. Disarm, of course, playing versus warriors with that. I don't really need to play Disarm versus other melees most of the time. I only played versus warriors because I feel like the need is more higher there. Or Frost Decay, my excuses versus Frost Decay, but we never play versus Frost Decay. But Frost Decay is probably one of the melees where you need to disarm every time whenever they are going for the pillar go. If they are not going for the pillar go, you don't disarm until they do. And since the CD is lower than Pillar of Frost, you will have disarm all the time versus their burst, which is quite nice versus Frost Decay. I play Frost Decay, I get the frustration how it is so dumb that you have no burst versus warriors, for example. Demolition in twos is very good versus Destrolocks and Affliction Warlocks, but Demonology doesn't really rely on Dark Pact, so Demolition is probably only good versus a few specs, but I often and not don't play it in trees because you get interrupted anyways, so the damage is not very relevant versus shields, for example. Warbringer, again, I already discussed it for twos and for double time, and I often and not don't play it in trees. Storm and Destruction, a very good talent. I play it most of the time because I have Unhinged. I want to have more Blade Storms and not less. It becomes a 1 minute CD. Of course, the Molten Wound is always applied anyways because it does always a more strike, so you will have that wound effect anyways. But I like the CD reduction because I like to have a root break, but also like to have the damage from Blade Storm. And often than not, Blade Storm with more strike is one of my top damage at the end of the game. It is very unappreciated, but it is a very good talent. So if you play Unhinged, please play Storm of Destruction. It is very nice to have a 1 minute CD Blade Storm, especially if you play Fury. You are already inhabit to play Blade Storm with a 1 minute CD, so now you will always have a 1 minute CD as Arms Warrior, for example, of course. Sharpened Blade, it is probably the most powerful PvP talent that you can play, and the thing is, Sharpened Blade does also crazy good damage with Moral Strike. So you are going to improve that Moral Strike to 15% more increased damage, but that reduced healing taken is the thing that makes Arms Warrior very noticeably good in trees. Of course, you don't have the uptime as a Fury Warrior for their healing reduction, but Sharpened Blade is 10% stronger than Slaughterhouse from Fury Warriors. So Sharpened Blade, always take it, always. If I need to sacrifice any talents, I would do like Warbanner, for example, and Disarm. For example, if we play versus a setup comp with an Arms Warrior, or I play with Duel whenever I'm playing with Elemental Shaman, or I play with Storm of Destruction with Warbanner, or with Master and Commander versus a Rogue, like an RMP, like sub RMP, and versus a outlaw RMP, I would play Warbanner, for example, because we are not dying into a shadowy duel, but more into CC. So those are the PvP talents. It was a very long section. My excuses, but I wanted to explain all the process with PvP talents and how important it is to actually not auto-lock all the PvP talents all the time, because the PvP talents by itself is a big part of how Arms Warrior feels like an Arms Warrior and how a Fury Warrior feels like a Fury Warrior most of the time. So let's discuss about the next topic, which is Covenant and Conduits. And I play Kyrian, but you can play Necrolord, of course. You will play Plague Divisor if you're playing versus as a Necrolord, and you will play Necrolord whenever you're playing with a Retribution Paladin, because you want to improve their mastery. Your mastery is quite nice too, because you will improve your damage, and the anti-slow is also quite nice, but mainly you want it to improve the damage from Retribution Paladin. Kyrian is probably the most played Covenant whenever you're playing outside of that comp. So if you're playing versus with a fire mage, if you're playing with a enhancement shaman, if you're playing with an elemental shaman because it peels like crazy, if you play with a warlock, if you play with a BM hunter, because I talk about KFC in my previous video, which is very nice to play, very efficient. You can play as turbo, you can play Turner Cleave, you can play with a demon hunter with Kyrian, which is also quite nice because you want to lock down that target. Kyrian makes you a bit more squishy, but the peel that you can give and the damage that you have as Kyrian is very important. So let's discuss about the conduits. I always play Pelagos. Why? Because I like that mastery buff. You can play Forge Light Prime Mechanicos anyways. For the stun, if you want to play with this with the old stun, or you want to have a shorter CD on your Spear of Bastion, which is also respectable, but I like to play, for example, Pelagos for the extra damage. You can also play Clea for the crit that it can provide. But Pelagos all the time. I really like Pelagos. I like the way how you can build your Covenant. So Piercing Verdict, I like it because it does instant damage, and also regeneration is increased by 37%. You will get also the defeating enemy, but that's a PvE talent. Stalwart Guardian, of course, 28 seconds on die by the sword, which is very nice. Of course, my eye level is very low, but if you have a higher eye level, it is always welcome to have a shorter defensive CD. You can play with Mortal Combo, which is one of the most powerful things for a arms warrior, because whenever you're going for a second small strike and it crits both, it does crazy damage. Or going to delete someone, and sometimes you don't even get why you killed someone, but when you're watching the recap, you crit 2 mortal strike into a Spear of Bastion, and that guy will not survive the day, you know. So it's a very good conduit. Of course, have a higher eye level. I'm just too bored to actually farm PvE. But if you can farm PvE, just do it. Inspiring Presence, I like to play that instead of other conduits, because it gives 28% increased duration and health. And I like to play Rallying Cry versus sub RMPs, which is quite noticeable how hard you can survive with this. Of course, let go of the past. Crash the Ramparts. You have a lot of overpowers in general, just because of the tier set, but also because of your talents. And it will increase the damage, and often than not will be in the top 4 of the most damaging spells for arms warriors. I play with Finesse Conduit because I prefer Finesse instead of Endurance. And Safeguard is one of the best conduits that you can have as an arms warrior, because it increases your conduit, your utility for your team. Arms warriors have huge utility. Fury warrior is pure damage, like a demon hunter, for example. But as an arms warrior, you want to have more utility, and this conduit can give you more utility. This is quite nice, but to be honest, you need to play around it. 10% extra strength and stamina is noticeable, but you need to see it with all the chaos that it is in the arenas. Sometimes you can miss it, sometimes you don't miss it, sometimes you proccing it without even noticing it. So I guess it's also nice. But I like the first combat meditation because I like mastery stacking on arms warrior, although it is not the best stat for arms warriors. So this is the Covenant and Conduits section. Let's talk about comps real quick. It is already a long video, but comps wise, you have a lot of comps. I'm going to discuss about trees, because twos, it is pretty simple. You need to play with a healer. You take any healer that it is possible to play. You can play with a Retribution Paladin if you want to have quick games, but that's it. 3v3. You can play Red War as a Necrolord, which is probably one of the best, if not the best comp for Arms Warrior. You can play with an Enhancement Shaman, which is Turbo Cleave, very good. You can play it as Kitten and Necrolord. You can play Thunder Cleave, like I said on my previous video, also a very good comp, but the Elemental Shaman really needs to step up his game because it's not like Castle Cleave. He will get focused all the time and he needs to actually peel for himself, but also we need to peel him off the targets, for example. You can play with a rogue, like an outlaw rogue, but I feel like that's raw damage, you don't really want it. You can play still KFC, like I said, KFC with BM Hunters, Survival Hunter, and Marksmanship Hunter. All three works, but I would recommend BM Hunter because of the CC that it can provide, but also the kiting, and doesn't really need to be open and free to do a lot of damage like a Marksmanship Hunter. BM Hunters, even though they are focused, they will do a lot of damage anyways. Those are the best comps. You can play a lot of comps. You can play with a Windwalker, with a DH, you can play with Warlock if you want, but those 4 or 5 comps for warriors are one of the best comps that you can play at this very moment in trees, especially for Arms Warrior, because you want to have also peel possibilities for yourself, because if they turn at you, you need to die by the sword or survive by leaping away or try to play defensive. Anyways, let's talk about the rotation. I've downloaded a add-in so you can see what I'm doing. Anyways, rotation guides. You will always start your charge on the target, of course, and you're going to stack those overpower. Stacking, and then whenever you are on voice with your ally, or you feel like you're going to burst, you always need to be prepared with your overpower stacks. So you have your 2 stacks, and whenever you are ready to burst, you do Spirit of Bastion, Avatar, Sharpened Blade, and you are going to Bladestorm. You don't do Warbreaker right away. Warbreaker is afterwards because they are going to pop CDs. Now you have Warbreaker, you have your powerful more strike, and you're going to hit as much people as you can. You can War Banner to decrease the CC that is going to go on you or your teammates. Slam sometimes, although you want to you want to play with Ignore Pain, and you keep those stacks very high. You try to execute whenever you can, and whenever you have a second go, you try to prepare your overpower stacks, and you're going for a Sharpened Blade, more strike, for example, and then it is a go time for your teammate, for example. So the rotation is quite simple. You already saw what I did with the Trophy GCD add-in. I do a lot of overpower just to do consistent damage, and whenever I'm ready to do damage, I'll try to Warbreaker, for example, and then Mortal Strike. You have a 15k normal hit, for example, and then you can do a second go with a overpower stack, Sharpened Blade, Bladestorm, and you see the damage that it can do. I mean, with all the Bladestorms and the Mortal Strike that it can give, it does a lot of damage. Still at a 14k DPS as a warrior rotation wise, which is a very high single target. Imagine if I actually tried to AoE, the damage would be insane. So you see the damage I can do as Bladestorm. I mean, I do a 10k hit crit as a Bladestorm, but also the Mortal Strike, 18k normal hit. I didn't even crit. I didn't have a lot of execute stacks. I didn't have a lot of crit in general. But you see the damage that it can provide and the damage that it can do for your team. Imagine you did more strike conduit procs, then you would do a lot more damage. Here I did a bit of AoE, of course, but I don't think that it would give too much more DPS. But in general, you want to have uptime. I'm not really the best at explaining what I'm doing whenever I'm doing it, but you will see at the end of the video some gameplay about Arms Warrior. So this marks the end of the video. You will have some gameplay afterwards. I really appreciate you watching this video, watching this guide. I hope you learned something. I hope you maybe want to try Arms Warrior again. And yeah, if you like those kinds of video, please subscribe to the channel, helps me a ton. Like the video to have more visibility on the video. Comment below what you think about Arms Warrior, what you think about the meta, what are you playing as an Arms Warrior, and be sure to be safe. We will see each other very soon. Bye.